Welcome back, and surprise, we are not doing the cloth brush. We're actually going to play with a new brush that is new to Blender. It's called the Boundary. Notice I'm in 2.92 alpha, so this is just a heads up of what will be coming in future builds. So let's do File, New, General, and if you don't want to download the alpha version, which is quote unquote unstable, you can just watch and just enjoy the ride. We're just going to show off some new brushes here. So let's go ahead and set up Suzanne for sculpting. We'll go to Matte Cap and add some colors. Then let's add a multi-resolution so we can start sculpting on this Suzanne here. And I'm just going to crank it up to 5 and flip into sculpt mode with Control Tab down. And let's find this new brush. So if we look down here, we just did slide relax and we were supposed to go into cloth, but now we have a new brush, the Boundary brush. And if you look at the picture, it's kind of like flopping an edge over on the side of itself. So let's go ahead and click on the brush if you have the alpha version, and notice the radius is 50, the strength is set to 1. And if we go to our tools, or actually let's go to tools over here. Notice on our tools, we have deformation target, the deformation, and the boundary fall off and the origin. So notice if you have the brush still activated, as I get close to this eyeball boundary here, you can see it start to light up around Suzanne's eyes here. And what Blender is looking for is like an open edge, like a non-manifold edge where it's just open. So if I tab into edit mode and select this eye and hover over this eye and hit L and then hit H, notice I hide the eyes and there's actually, some holes right here. So that is what Blender is grabbing in sculpt mode while we have the boundary brush. So let's go back into the boundary brush. Notice our eyes are still hidden. So if you click and drag, it will kind of flip and bend this part of the eye here. You could also turn on symmetry if you wanted to, and bend those eyeballs in and out, if you wanted to do something crazy. So that's one way you can use your boundary tool, is if you say you needed to make like a sleeve or something, you could easily flip the geometry around something. Usually it's going to be good for if you're doing something with like the solidify modifier. So what we can do is go into edit mode with tab or control tab, and let's go to 3 to select the top faces, and I'm just shift clicking on the top 4 there, and then hit X to delete those faces. And notice we've got a big hole here. So we're going to use the boundary brush on this, but let's actually extrude it a little bit. So hit 2 to go into edge mode and double click on the loop on the opening here, or alt click to get that loop selection, and then just hit E for extrude and Z to lock it to the Z axis and just bring it up just a little bit like that. So now if we swap back over into sculpt mode, we've got some interesting looking shapes going on here. And I'm going to go ahead and save because I forgot to do that. I got so excited about this brush. So I'm going to do File, Save As, and we'll just call it Boundary and save it. So now we've got opening on the eyes and we've got openings on the top of the head here. So the boundary brush, notice now it's actually starting to grab that. And if we click and drag, it will bend depending on how big our brush radius was. So notice our radius is kind of telling us right here. So I'm just going to undo that, maybe make our brush a little bit bigger. And notice now this little radius line is showing you where it's going to start bending at. So that's how you control that part. But say we wanted to change the deformation to be, instead of bend, which we have been doing, let's do maybe expand. So if you click on that one, notice it's going to expand or contract that little loop there, or that boundary edge. And if we switch to inflate, you guessed it, it's going to inflate it. So it's just getting bigger or smaller. And then if we go over here and switch it to grab, it's going to just grab that. And notice I have the symmetry on, so it's kind of overlapping itself. But if you just wanted to manhandle this boundary and move it all around, then you would want to use the grab. And then we have the twist, which is going to twist it. So I'm going to turn off my symmetry just for a second and do some twisting. So that looks a little bit better. So you can twist it either way, depending on what you're trying to do with that boundary edge. And then you can also change it to smooth. And that's just going to try and smooth it out there for you. So not much of a change there, but it is very, very, very slightly smoothing out this. And I'm just kind of going in a clockwise circle, and it's just barely smoothing out that boundary loop. You can also change the boundary fall off. So if you want it to just be inside the brush radius, then say if I'm coming in here and I want to do maybe a bend, it's only going to bend that one from as far as my outer circle of my brush there. So, if you wanted to do some cool like bendy bends on all this, and kind of make it look like some weird little trash can, or, just give it some edge flare there. So you could do that. Same thing goes with all the other ones. And the boundary origin offset here is just going to offset the boundary origin from your brush. So you can play with that if you want. I'm just going to leave mine down. And we also have the deformation target cloth simulation, which we haven't really gone into cloth yet because that is the next brush. But this will try and make your boundary edge a little more cloth looking, and is very, very heavy, very extreme. So it looks like it tried to work. I'm just going to go ahead and save. This brush could, is very, very heavy. So let's see if I can get some cloth simulation here. And so it's really thinking it's actually paused. Oh, you can kind of see it here. So see right here, these little wrinkles that are starting to appear. Oh, there we go. So the cloth deformation is going to make your boundary edge a little more cloth-esque. I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. That's kind of cool. So I would just leave it on geometry unless you're trying to make it look more clothy. And so let's go ahead and save if you're following along. And I want to show you another trick you can do. If you go into edit mode, and we can hit Alt-H to bring our eyes back, and just hit X to delete those. So now it's just Suzanne and like an empty head with an opening at the top. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and save, add another modifier. So we'll just twiddle up this multi-resolution, and let's add a solidify. So notice right off the bat, we've gotten a little tiny bit of solidification of kind of geometry that's appearing. So, without the simplify modifier, we cannot 3D print this. It's just an open, non-manifold item. But if we add the solidify onto this open piece of geometry, it now is like a mask. So we can increase the thickness, maybe like 0.5. And notice we've got this kind of inner wall that's appeared. And so that's pretty cool. And now if we go into object mode, you can see we've got a nice sculpt of our Suzanne with some edge thickness there with our cloth simulation. So we got a really cool and funky looking empty monkey here. You could use it for like a candle holder. I don't know, but it's just to show you, with the boundary loop, you can still use it as long as you add a solidify modifier that will make the objects actually 3D printable. So that is the boundary brush. Just lets you really mess around with any kind of open edge inside of your sculpting. And let's go ahead and jump into another new brush, which is the cloth brush.